Picture this. Right now, floating about 400 kilometers straight up in the pitch-black vacuum of space, there's a massive structure. Imagine a 20-story white metal fortress hurtling through orbit. It is literally up there right now as we speak. But here's the catch. Unlike most things we hear about in space exploration, the inner workings of this specific structure are incredibly secretive, highly proprietary, and tightly controlled. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be decoding the absolutely fascinating and honestly sometimes a little alarming science happening right now aboard China's Tiangong space station. So what exactly is going on inside this white fortress? Well, first off, it is strictly off limits. NASA? Can't go there. The European Space Agency? Nope. India? Excluded. It is a completely isolated, locked-down environment. And because of that, the unprecedented, highly restricted zero-gravity experiments happening behind those closed metal doors, well, they're drawing some really intense scrutiny from the global scientific community. Now, the station itself is called Tiangong, which beautifully translates to Heavenly Palace. But, this isn't really a story about heaven. The creation of this orbital palace actually stems from a pretty massive geopolitical insult. It's this incredible story of exclusion that essentially pushed an entire nation to build its own isolated fortress of science, rather than just sit on the sidelines of human space exploration. To really understand this, the timeline is absolutely crucial. Let's rewind to 1998. That's when 16 countries teamed up to build the International Space Station, the ISS. China really wanted in, but they were explicitly kept out. Then, fast forward to 2011, the US passes a law known as the Wolf Amendment. This legally barred NASA from any collaboration or data sharing with China whatsoever. So rather than just protesting, China decided, okay, we're going to build our own house. In 2021, they launched the core Tianhe module, followed up with the Wentian and Mengtian modules, and successfully completed the whole shebang by November 2022. Now, when we compare the sheer scale of the ISS to Tiangong, there is a really stark contrast. Just looking at the weight, the ISS is a massive 450 tons. To put that into perspective, that's roughly 90 elephants, and it boasts 16 interconnected rooms. Tiangong, on the other hand, it's way smaller. It sits at just 70 tons, so about 14 elephants, and has only 3 rooms. It is a much more concentrated and compact space. But hey, do not let that smaller size fool you. It's really not about the square footage here. It's about what is actually happening inside. Despite its compact footprint, the heavily restricted proprietary experiments taking place inside those 3 rooms are literally sending shockwaves through the scientific world. Let's take a closer look at exactly what kind of wild stuff is being tested behind those highly restricted walls. Get this. In a July 2025 cargo delivery, China sent up something incredibly delicate. They call it an organoid on a chip. Basically, this is a credit card-sized device that contains real, live human brain cells and tiny blood vessels just floating up there in a state of free fall. Officially, scientist Ken Jinhua is running this experiment to study exactly how human neurological systems wire themselves and adapt when you completely strip away Earth's gravity. It's a profound, groundbreaking look at human biology at its absolute most fundamental level. But of course, whenever you have totally isolated data, you're going to get speculation. While the official stance is that this is purely to understand zero-gravity biology, some folks within the broader scientific community have voiced concerns. There are murmurs that these could be early steps toward human behavioral or neurological control experiments. Because there is zero international oversight, it remains a heavily guarded study, and one that definitely keeps international observers guessing. Now, here's a crazy twist. Not everything on board was actually sent there on purpose. Back in 2023, the Shenzhou 15 crew was doing some routine cleaning on the exterior of the station when they noticed these strange spots. They tested them back on Earth, and it turned out to be an Earth bacteria that had somehow hitched a ride. But it had mutated. It transformed into a brand new, space-only species that they officially named Novialia tiangongensis. It developed a way higher tolerance to radiation, its DNA repairs itself incredibly fast, and it even builds protective shields around itself. It literally adapted to survive the harsh vacuum of space. How wild is that? So it's absolutely crucial to note that China isn't just looking at biology, they are looking at real estate. In November 2024, they launched bricks made of simulated moon soil up to the station. They've essentially bolted them to the outside, exposing them to cosmic rays and brutal, extreme temperature swings for 3 whole years. Why go through all that trouble? Well, bringing Earth materials all the way to the moon is just way too expensive. If they want to build a permanent lunar base, they need to know for sure if moon dirt can be baked into bricks that will actually keep astronauts alive in the extreme environment of space. And think about it. If you're going to build a moon base, you really need to know if humans can survive there long term, right? Enter the Shenzhou 21 mission. China sent 4 specially trained mice to the station, 2 males, 2 females. They're tracking their bone loss, muscle deterioration, and calcium depletion. But the big one? They are testing if these mice can successfully reproduce in space. They're trying to answer the ultimate question for future Mars and moon colonies. Can humans safely raise healthy children off-world? Without gravity, cellular development changes fundamentally, so these 4 tiny mice might just hold the key to understanding if multi-generational space travel is even biologically possible. To manage all of this incredibly complex research, the astronauts have some serious high-tech help. Activated in July 2025, I'd like you to meet Wukong. This is a fully integrated AI space assistant. Think of it kind of like Siri or Google Assistant, but purpose-built for an orbital space station. Wukong doesn't just play music or set your egg timer. In August 2025, it actually guided astronauts step by step through a grueling 6-hour spacewalk. It really proves just how incredibly capable AI has become in these high-stakes, off-world environments. And the sheer volume of solo research China is pulling off is just staggering. In just 1 year, they hit massive milestones. We're talking 31 new science projects launched, sending up 867 kilograms of cargo, bringing 83 kilos of vital scientific samples back down to Earth, and collecting over 150 terabytes of data. Overall, they have completed over 200 distinct experiments so far. And the crazy part? They're just getting started. China's ultimate goal is to scale this up to an astonishing 1,000 active experiments. They are preparing to dive deep into stuff like dark matter, gravitational waves, cancer cells, and space medicine. Studying these specific disciplines in a microgravity environment could honestly unlock scientific breakthroughs that are just fundamentally impossible to achieve down here on the ground. But this brings us to a huge unintended consequence of that 2011 exclusion. Because China was legally forced to build and operate entirely alone, they now possess a complete data monopoly. There is no international team to vet this research or demand transparency. Think about it. China generates the data, China holds the data, and China alone decides if or when the rest of the world even gets a peek at it. Which brings us to a looming, absolutely critical deadline, the year 2030. Now, this isn't just an arbitrary number. 2030 is the exact year China plans to land humans on the moon. But, crucially, it's also the exact year NASA plans to officially retire the International Space Station, which, let's be honest, is already 28 years old and aging pretty rapidly in the harsh conditions of low Earth orbit. And that creates a massive geopolitical paradigm shift. When the ISS is eventually retired and burns up in the atmosphere, Tiangong is going to be the last station standing. China is uniquely positioned to become the only nation on Earth with a fully operational, continuously crewed space station in orbit. That is going to fundamentally change the entire balance of aerospace dominance. It is so fascinating to look at how different nations react to being locked out of the room. Both China and India were initially kept out of the ISS, but while India's space program took a slightly slower, separate route focused on their own distinct priorities, China really used that exclusion as fuel. They aggressively built their own station, returned soil from the moon, and landed a rover on Mars. And they did all of it entirely solo. Which leaves us with this final thought to ponder. A nation that was once explicitly banned from the global space table has quietly built a mysterious, high-tech fortress just 400 kilometers above our heads. They've got live brain cells on ships, rapidly mutating space bacteria, and their eyes set firmly on the moon. As the ISS fades into history and Tiangong rises to take its place, we really have to ask, who will actually control the future of human space exploration? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.